This is the Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever. The Financial Survival Network.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Day is 1/17/2021. And it's time for another Triple Lutz Report. This is Triple Lutz Report number 487. And well, welcome back. Hey, make sure you go sign up at the site for your free newsletter if you haven't done it already. Got one coming out very, very shortly, like in the next day or so. So please sign up, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. In any event, hey, got a huge outpouring of support from all of you out there in regards to my battle with COVID-19. Virtually completely healed. The only thing different about me is I weigh 17 pounds less. I can't gain any weight, even if I wanted to, which is kind of my fantasy for my entire life. But for now, I don't expect it to last much longer. I'm feeling great. Going to start working out again, hopefully tomorrow, the day after. I've been walking, trying to walk a mile or two a day, and things are really going great. So because there was so much interest and so much outpouring of support, I just kind of wanted to go over the whole event again. Now it's been a couple of weeks since I've been out of the hospital, and just to let you know what I went through, and hopefully you can learn something from it. So I call it Beating COVID-19, My Personal Journey. And as you know, leading up to New Year's Day, I spent a week in the hospital fighting COVID-19. And this along with a case of walking pneumonia, bacterial pneumonia. And it was a very challenging experience, but quite enlightening and beneficial as well. And I do mean that. Learned a lot from this experience, and I wouldn't take anything back. What can I tell you? From the pandemic's very underpinnings, I made no secret of my belief that governments and politicians at every level around the world were mishandling the pandemic. COVID-19 is quite serious. I've never said that it wasn't, especially when you're dealing with the elderly and those with comorbidities when they're affected. While the absence of underlying illnesses or those of younger ages does not guarantee immunity from the coronavirus, it greatly decreases the mortality rate and the likelihood of serious residual effects. And really, that's what we're talking about here. We've known about this from the very beginning, that it affects the elderly most, those 65 and up, and those with comorbidities. And from the start of the pandemic, I made a pledge to myself to lead my best possible life, all the while taking basic precautions against the disease, continuous hand washing, confining many, if not most, of my social activities to the out of doors, and taking a preventative course of HCQ, vitamin D3, zinc, and other supplements. Look, I never believed that I would get COVID. Going back to the early days of the outbreak during the Diamond Princess cruise ship experience, less than 20% of the crew and passengers actually got infected by COVID, despite their constant exposure and lack of social distancing. In hindsight, I understand that even if 70 to 80% of the population is immune, that fact's in contention, but I think it's reasonable. It's a reasonable inference to draw. It's still very possible and likely that you could be one of the 20% who's going to get the illness, as was I. It's a fact of life that we have no way of knowing which group we're in. We just don't know until you either get it or the pandemic ends and you haven't gotten it. clearly the majority of the population hasn't gotten and isn't getting and is not going to get COVID. We lose sight of this fact. There's 330 million people. If 10% of in the United States, if 10% of them get it, that will be 33 million people that get it. If 20% get it, that's 66 million. There's still hundreds of millions of people who will not, in fact, get it. That's the fact of the matter. The majority of the population hasn't gotten it, and it isn't going to get COVID. That's the fact. So, but if you do get it, hey, it's the most serious disease in the world, because your body, your life, my life, most serious thing to me. So we can argue the science all day long, but there's no question that the disease is real and taking a toll. How much of a toll is really the question, and how much of the toll is due to the misbegotten public response. That's really the issue. There are certainly a number of people who had underlying illnesses that have passed on due to COVID. And the actual number, of course, is subject to debate, somewhere around 300,000, they say. Who knows? The actual number, like I said, we're not going to know for many years. But people with comorbidities like high blood pressure, like diabetes, like obesity, you can live for many years with chronic disease with these issues. So the fact is that a substantial number of people have died who wouldn't have died at this particular time. We can't really know when they would have. That's just beyond our knowledge as humans. But COVID, at least in its early stages, was the intervening cause of death, regardless of what the death certificates might indicate. There could be underreporting, there could be overreporting. We don't really know that. But the fact is, there are people who've passed on because of COVID, and if COVID hadn't come, they would still be here. And then there's a very small minority of people who actually had no underlying illnesses, no comorbidities, got COVID. And this is in all different age groups, but it's a very small percentage, somewhere 6 to 10% of the total deaths. Hey, what can you say? We feel for these people, but this is a situation that we're living through. But other deaths have actually been caused by the lockdowns and the response to COVID. And they've been underreported and apparently are quite high. Accidental drug overdoses, people doing drugs because they're not working and they're depressed, whatever. Suicides risen exponentially. In addition, during the lockdowns, the effort to flatten the curve, extremely serious non-COVID patient procedures were classified as elective and thereby delayed. And we have no idea how many treatable heart issues and cancer diagnoses became untreatable as a result. We're just never going to know. And another thing is that many people, especially the elderly, you avoided going to the hospital under any circumstances in an effort to avoid potential COVID exposure. So for all these reasons and more, I chose to ignore the histrionic-based response of the government and the medical establishment. I could have been hiding under my bed for 1 year and then gone out one moment, stopped at the store and gotten infected. And then what? I would have been no better off than attempting to live my life in a somewhat normal way for the past year. I would have wound up exactly the same. And in fact, a very close friend of mine had almost this very same thing happen to her. She became a virtual recluse for the past year, and she still contracted COVID right around the same time as I did. Fortunate for her, her case was not as bad, as serious as mine. She only spent a day or two in the hospital. But who had the better life during the past year? It wasn't her. End result was still the same. We both got it. I enjoyed myself. I was active. I was doing what I wanted to do. She became a virtual recluse. Who had the better life for the past year? So thoughts of death. Based upon my age and health profile, I determined early on that I had roughly a 1% chance of dying if I contracted COVID. So that's 99 to 1. And those are pretty good odds. Insurance companies get very wealthy dealing with such risks. And in life, we're never certain what's going to happen. But I felt pretty confident that COVID was not going to be my demise. However, like Mike Tyson said, a plan is great until you get punched in the face. Illness and disease often take an emotional toll. And for me, COVID was no different. It was as if I was swimming in a sea of emotion. Though the nurses and doctors assured me that I would likely make a full recovery, I was completely on an emotional roller coaster. And the first 2 days of hospitalization were definitely my personal low. My breathing was impeded, hindered, not terribly, but enough that it was very concerning. And I was psychologically very run down. Finally, I hit bottom and I was sure I was getting ready for the ultimate exit. And the nurse reassured me that even though I was on oxygen, I was receiving very little. My temperature was going down, my condition was stable. And finally, confirmation came in the form of an improving chest x ray. And while I had gotten COVID, it was really the pneumonia that had slammed me. The actual COVID itself, I felt was pretty mild and it didn't really bother me that much. So as I improved, my breathing improved daily. COVID's low grade fever went away. Every day, I'm feeling better and stronger. My blood pressure was very high during this time. But aside from that, my condition was improving. And finally, after 7 days, it was time to leave. And one of the best nights I spent in a long time was in my bedroom watching videos and relaxing. So, what were the lessons of COVID? Well, first, whether you have the mildest symptoms or almost none at all, treat any illness as if you have COVID. Contact your doctor or hospital immediately and start getting treated with antibiotics, perhaps antivirals, whatever they say. They're so good with the therapeutics now that they can get you on a regimen almost from the beginning, and you might not even have to ever go to the hospital. And I probably could have avoided hospitalization altogether if only I had acknowledged the real possibility that I had gotten COVID rather than being in my own personal denial about it, because the symptoms until the pneumonia set in were just exceedingly minor and intermittent. So, look, the faster you get treated, the less likely you'll have breathing and other issues. When in doubt, just get tested and go for the rapid test. Get that rapid test. You'll know that much sooner if treatment is needed, and then you can start it that much faster. 1 or 2 days can make all the difference, especially if you're able to get those monoclonal antibodies that Trump and many people in his administration were able to get treated with. The Regeneron monoclonal antibody. More and more doses are going out. It looks like it's a real game changer. So if you're able to do it in the first day or two, you'll be out of there in no time. And look, next thing is don't panic. From my hospital experience, the vast majority of COVID unit patients are being successfully treated and discharged. And unless you have really serious underlying issues, comorbidities, the odds are high that you'll be walking out of there too. And really, that's the most important thing. Just use your head and stay optimistic. Finally, don't make my mistake, okay? I was taking vitamins, supplements, drugs to prevent COVID, but it's still possible that you can get it nonetheless. However, like I said, I would not have lived my life any differently during the past year. I do believe that vitamin D3 and zinc make it much more likely you're going to survive the experience. And I'll share a graphic on a study that will help clear that up for you. They can't say for sure right now, but the indication is that people taking vitamin D3 who have an adequate level are 80% less likely to perish, maybe even higher. So now it's time to get back to work and help people prepare for the next event, which no doubt is coming soon. You can be sure of that. Good luck, all of you. Thanks for the massive outpouring of support, and I wish you all only the best. Thanks. Kerry Lutz, been another Triple Lutz Report, signing off. Go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com, sign up for your newsletter, and well, send us some emails, okay? KL@kerrylutz.com. If you've had COVID or you haven't, or somebody you know has had it, relatives, tell me about it. Share your experience with me. I'd really like to hear. That's it for now. We'll talk to you again soon.
This is the Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever. The Financial Survival Network.